Hello, my name is Susian and I'm the head baker at the Cafe King. And today we're going to be talking in depth about the first step in the whole process of sourdough baking, and that step is feeding the starter. If you enjoy seeing some of our sourdough or kefir content, please like and subscribe for future updates. So this video is actually the first part of a series about sourdough bread baking in Malaysia. And if you want to see a general overview of the entire sourdough baking process, you can watch our video. The link will be here. Okay, so the first step is feeding the starter. Now, why exactly do we need to do this step? It's because, you want to feed the starter to get the starter active. And why do we need it active? It's so that when the starter is active, it can immediately get started on fermenting the dough right as soon as you mix it into the dough. So in that way, you can actually shorten the entire process, the entire fermentation process, because the starter will be ready to go right as soon as you use it. Okay, so how do you feed your starter? Well, that actually depends on the amount of starter you need according to the recipe you're following. For our recipe, for one loaf of sourdough bread, you'd need about 30 grams of starter. So just to be safe, you'd prepare more than that. So if you need 30 grams, you'd prepare, say, about 60 grams, an extra 30 grams to be safe. And all you have to do is to feed the starter in a 1:1:1 ratio. That is 1 part starter to 1 part flour and 1 part water. So if you're preparing 60 grams of starter for your recipe, you take 20 grams of starter from your original starter, and then you put it in a glass container. It doesn't have to be very big. And then you'd feed it 20 grams of flour and 20 grams of water. And be sure to mix it very thoroughly so that there are no dry bits of flour left in the starter. And in Malaysia's weather, it would take around 3.5 hours to 5. I'd say that is the range at which the starter will be at its most active state. Then at that time, it will be ready for use in the next step of the process. Now, when you first mix your starter, it will just look like a lump of dough in a container. And how would you know when it's ready to be used in your recipe? Well, one way would be to look at the how much it expands. So if you make an initial mark at where the starter is at the beginning, you'll notice that as the starter reaches its peak, it will usually double or sometimes even triple in volume depending on how active your starter is. And you'll know when it's ready to be used when you can see lots of bubbles appearing on the surface, and you can see that the surface of the starter is still sort of concave, indicating that it's still rising slightly. And when you see that the surface, when it starts to fall a little bit, you'll see that the surface of the starter just goes like slightly flat. And that's when you know you really should be using it, because that is when it has just started to go past its most active state. And there's actually something you can do if you're really not sure, and that's called a float test. And how you do that is you take a little bit of starter, be very careful to not knock out any of the air in it, and you place it in some water and just gently flick it into the water. And if it floats, that means your starter is aerated enough to start to be used. Yeah, and if it sinks, you just have to wait for a little bit more and let starter reach its maximum peak. If you have exceeded the window of peak activeness of your starter, you will know because the starter would have started to sink, and you can actually see the residue stains at the side of your glass container. And when you see that, you'll know that you missed the window. Yeah, try feeding your starter again. Okay, so that's all for the first step in the sourdough baking process. Now, if you liked our video and you'd like to see more, please subscribe. It'll mean a lot to us. So if you're Malaysian and you'd like to give our bread a try, you can find us in the link in the description below. We actually deliver our bread to around the Klang Valley, and we also post to the state's in West Malaysia. So yeah, give it a try, and we'll see you in the next video.